So good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. My name is Philip Carter. I'm the director of the Center for Humanities in an Urban Environment at Florida International University here in Miami. The pronouns he, him, his work for me. We are holding this roundtable in order to bring attention to and ask questions about the role of interdisciplinary humanities, social science, and policy centers in the context of the challenges of 2020 and beyond. We're interested to think about the nature of the political and intellectual spaces university centers create, both within the university community and as bridges to and between communities, as well as links to an even broader public. We want to ask, what do centers do in particular that departments or programs don't do or cannot do? We also want to take a moment to recognize the public value of the humanistic and social scientific disciplines, and to acknowledge that centers are often leading the way for our university institutions in cutting edge and public facing ways in a year characterized not only by the COVID-19 pandemic, but also economic lockdown and mass protests brought about by longstanding health, economic, and educational disparities rooted as these are in structural racism. Of course, our disciplines and the centers that support them have been around long before our current historical moment, but the moment has forced us or provided us with the opportunity to clarify our priorities, which for many of us has been a sharpening of our focus on issues of social justice, especially around race and ethnicity. But as this work unfolds, and as centers take on more and more public-facing work, we acknowledge new pressures and constraints and expectations that have emerged on what we do and how we do it. Budgets are, of course, at the top of the list, but also speaking to different constituencies, creating new collaborations, and thinking deeply about issues of access, accessibility, and audience, and the kinds of inequalities we may inadvertently and unknowingly underwrite as we seek to address issues of diversity, inequality, and inclusion in our centers and our centers programming. We also appreciate that the conditions of the moment, including the contingencies of quarantine and digital work, present new opportunities just as much as new challenges. And part of what we hope to do today is to explore both the opportunities, and we welcome your input, questions, concerns, and ideas. And we'll have plenty of time to discuss at the end of this, as my colleague Christine Mallinson will describe in her overview of the event. Christine?
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much. This is Christine Mallinson speaking. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I'm the other co-organizer with Philip of today's roundtable, and I just want to take a minute to cover what's to come in terms of format. So there will be 5 panelists speaking today. Philip, who you just heard from Florida International University. I'm here from the University of Maryland-Baltimore County, also known as UMBC. Christina Chia from Duke University. Sylvester Johnson from Virginia Tech, and Lee Swigart from Brandeis University. Each of our speakers will take a turn. First, each person will talk about the respective university center or institute that they direct. We will then present a key initiative that each of our centers have launched or undertaken in response to the present moment. And then we will also discuss important issues that this work raises. Before we kick things off with our first panelist, I want to just reiterate some accessibility information as requested by the AAA. First, captioning is provided during this event. Second, attendees should submit any questions for us via the Q&A box. It's best not to do that via the chat box, which is to be used for logistical support. If you're unable to write your questions into the Q&A box, just use the Zoom raise hand function, and someone will be able to unmute you to ask your question verbally. And I think that's all of the housekeeping details. So next slide, Philip, and back to you as our first panelist.
Thanks, Christine. This is Philip Carter speaking again. And as I said at the top of the program, I'm the director of the Center for Humanities in an Urban Environment at Florida International University in Miami, Florida. I wanted to tell you a little bit about our institutional context to start. FIU is the largest public institution in the state of Florida system. We have about 60,000 students, including 45,000 undergraduates. And we're the largest Hispanic serving institution in the United States. Just for your information, a Hispanic serving institution is a federal designation meaning 25% or greater undergraduate or undergraduate equivalent enrollments. FIU's undergraduate student body is about 72% Latinx and includes immense racial and ethnic, generational, language, and national origin diversity, mirroring the diversity found in our South Florida communities. Our logo, which we currently have shown on the screen, includes the FIU bold block letters with our name written out in bold typeface next to it. And our website is also shown on the screen currently, and that is humanities.fiu.edu, humanities.fiu.edu. So I just want to quickly overview the three main areas of our work in the center under my directing. The first thing is that we're a traditional humanities center. We serve humanities departments and programs across the university, and I think of this as a kind of support role. The second thing is that we also fill a gap at the institution that does not have a dedicated program in community studies or Miami studies or local studies or even Latino studies, to be honest with you. And so we think of ourselves as a community studies center, and we focus on the languages, cultures, and diverse people of South Florida. And our lema, our theme is the humanities live here, las humanidades viven aquí. And in this area of our responsibility and commitment, we host events related to the community. We also conduct research, so we think of ourselves as a research center, and we also support other initiatives related to community studies around Florida International University. And finally, and this is what I'll talk about most today, we think of ourselves as a social justice center. And we are proud to stage conversations around topics that matter not only in South Florida, but beyond. And this mostly comes forth in our events, but also as a support function for other units on campus who are likewise invested in issues of social justice. This slide shows posters for 4 events that we've held since the beginning of lockdown. And I just want to briefly describe what's on the posters. I'm going to move from left to right. And as I describe these posters, I'll also be describing the events, so you can see the type of stuff that we've put on for public audiences. Our events are kind of a cross between academic lectures and talk radio or TV shows. We produce in-house video montages that kind of capture the moment related to a particular topic. We hire local musicians to provide music for the events. And so it creates a experience that we hope is not exactly entertaining, but really accessible to non-academic audiences. The first poster is called Black Humanity Matters, a teach-in on the crisis of race in America. It's black and orange poster. The second poster, which was an event that we held in July, just after the George Floyd murder. And we had about 1,000 people attend that event. The next poster is called Monumental: Flags, Statues, and the Politics of Public Space. That's a black and red poster with a statue covered in red, which kind of depicts a graffiti. The third poster is a blue and pink poster with a person surrounded by flowers, carnations. And the title of that event was Latinx, What's in a Name? And the fourth poster is a white poster with stacks of newspapers on fire that with the title Fake News, Objectivity, Subjectivity, and the Search for Truth. I'll be happy to answer your questions about the events in the Q&A. The issues that we face in CHU in the remaining 45 seconds is that we're doing public-facing programming on issues of social justice and that are sites for public education and sites of inclusion for minoritized groups. And so we say what looks like what's critical conversations for some is kind of daily bread for others, things that people need to hear. So one of our challenges is shuttling between who really needs to have this topic brought into their awareness and who needs to have this in order to be included. Public-facing programming must be free to achieve the goal of maximum engagement, but maximum engagement involves a lot of costs. So finding money to pay for these types of things is something that we've been struggling with. And the public-facing programming is potentially immense. How do we find audiences, keep audiences, and enfranchise audiences who are not normally drawn to university events? I'll stop there.
Okay, hi again, everyone. This is Christine Mallinson speaking. I direct the Center for Social Science Scholarship, which is our comprehensive college-wide social science research center at UMBC. On my screen, you'll see the logo of our center, which is a swirl of dots in our university colors of yellow, black, and red. And as noted on the slide, our website is socialscience.umbc.edu. I've also provided here the mission of our center. The Center for Social Science Scholarship promotes excellence across the social sciences at UMBC. Spanning disciplines and programs, we connect scholars who engage in social scientific study, asking key questions about social life, addressing problems of local and global concern, sharing knowledge about public issues, and connecting research to practice and policy. Guided by the core principles of inclusion, equity, and diversity, we encourage intellectual exchange and cross-cutting dialogue as we strive to advance social progress and equity in ways that are critically relevant, not only to UMBC, but to our local, national, and global communities. So I share that so that you can see that we do take inclusion, equity, and diversity as central to the work that we do in the center. This is the case both for the Social Science Center and also for the UMBC itself as a university, which is known for inclusion and which has a strong social justice focus. Next slide, please. So along those lines, I want to speak today about one key initiative that we carried out this year, in which the Center for Social Science Scholarship worked in partnership with 3 other big research centers in our college: the Drescher Center for the Humanities, the Center for Innovation, Research, and Creativity in the Arts, and the Imaging Research Center, to hold a series of cross-disciplinary conversations for faculty and staff, which we called anti-racism and action sessions, focused on our roles as faculty and staff, because we wanted to focus on what actions we can all do to advance social justice. Thus far, our topics have been racial justice, social change, and civic and community action, memorials and the removal of monuments in Baltimore and across the US. That was the one with the arts focus. Health disparities and structural racism in relation to COVID-19, which had a social science focus, as did the final one: political participation, voting discrimination and suppression, and democracy, which we held just a couple of weeks ago. For each session, our structure is to invite a couple key speakers from campus, whether in their research, teaching, or community engagement, and to talk about how their work advances our understandings of these issues in ways that can inspire actions by everyone. We keep the conversations really informal, no slides, and we've had anywhere from about 30 to 50 participants from our campus community each time. And an important issue that the work raises is that centers and institutes are often sites of and for interdisciplinary work, and particularly given the fact that the challenges that we're facing in 2020 are so complex and multifaceted and wide-ranging, we particularly wanted to collaborate across the centers and across disciplines for these sessions, so that we could have conversations in ways that serve faculty and staff, not just in isolation within one area, but across the arts, humanities, and social sciences. Another key issue was that our conversations are structured in such a way that we feature the work of scholars of color. So for each session, about half of the speakers have been scholars of color, so that our centers can help identify these folks as experts to lead the conversation, but also with an emphasis on getting others involved so that they are not the only ones doing this diversity work. As I mentioned before, we had really strong interest, sustained interest in these sessions. And as a result, we wanted to keep the momentum going. So we are currently in a planning process to launch some sort of an ongoing collaborative faculty working group to go forward that would be co-sponsored by all of the centers that were involved in this initiative. And the goal is to create a cohort or a critical mass of faculty and staff, again, across the social sciences, humanities, and arts disciplines that would be dedicated to carrying this anti-racism work forward from the vantage point of our campus to meet those externalities and concerns that this year has foregrounded. So I will stop there, and next slide, please, Philip.
Okay. Hi, this is Christina Chia speaking. My pronouns are she and hers. And I'm the Associate Director of the John Hope Franklin Humanities Institute at Duke University, which we abbreviate as FHI. And so my virtual background, which I wanted to call attention to, is the building where our institute is located, where I am not presently. So at the most general level, the FHI's mission is to support scholarship, pedagogy, and public programming in the humanities, arts, and interpretive social sciences. But there are two distinctive characteristics in our institutional DNA that are especially relevant for our conversation today. So I want to call attention to those. The first is that we're named after John Hope Franklin, the eminent 20th century historian, a field-defining scholar of African-American history, Southern history, US history, and a lifelong advocate for civil rights and social justice. So while our institute supports the humanities in general, part of our founding mission is specifically to elevate work on race and equity defined in broad historical and geographical terms. And the second distinctive characteristic that I want to mention is that the FHI at Duke belongs to a class of entities called university institutes, which were created in the mid-2000s to facilitate interdisciplinary activities across the whole campus, particularly between the liberal arts core of the university and the professional schools. What this means for the FHI is that while our primary constituencies are faculty and students in the humanities, we're also the Humanities Institute for the School of Environment, for the medical school, et cetera. In other words, for the university. Well, so at least theoretically or aspirationally, that's how we are positioned in the institution. And so, let's see, I think we can still stay on this slide. So the initiative that I want to talk about today is one that sits at that interface between these two aspects of our identity. On one hand, the Franklin legacy of anti-racist scholarship, and on the other, our position as a humanities center with a kind of extra humanities reach. And in my view, this is a really important site of intervention for the humanities intellectually and strategically in this moment of conversion crises that we find ourselves, with the pandemic, global climate emergency, racial awakening and increasing backlash in the US, and last but not least, the budget crises rolling across higher ed. And actually, I want to pause for a moment and just note that the logo that's on our slide here is our full name, John Hope Franklin Humanities Institute at Duke University, over a gray background in a cute little window with 3 human silhouettes. And so we can move to the next slide. Thanks. So let me turn to my example then, which is actually a longstanding one that's taken on even sharper relevance for this moment. The FHI is the administrative base to a number of humanities labs and affiliated centers, including the Duke Human Rights Center, the DHRC. So over the past 6 or 7 years, the DHRC and the School of Environment here at Duke have been building a research and teaching partnership with the Center for Rural Enterprise and Environmental Justice, or CREEJ, which is a community development organization in Lowndes County, Alabama. Part of the historic Black Belt, this area was known as Bloody Lowndes during the Civil Rights era because of intense white suppression of Black organizing. So CREEJ is founded and directed by the environmental health activist Catherine Coleman Flowers, who actually just recently won a MacArthur Fellowship. So congrats to Catherine. So this partnership began with a focus on the severe lack of wastewater infrastructure in Lowndes and surrounding areas, and has evolved into a kind of incubator of student activism and other environmental justice and anti-racist projects. The partnership that has brought Duke faculty and students to Lowndes to conduct research that directly supports CREEJ's policy advocacy work, and brought Flowers to Duke as a practitioner in residence. And I'm actually probably going to skip over some of this, but the one thing I want to mention is that the next stage of this partnership will, we hope, support more interpretive kinds of research, such as ethnographic work or oral history, that again will be done in partnership with Lowndes residents. So as an administrator, I have not been personally involved in this project, but I'm going to later share a couple links to some publications where you can learn more about the project from members of the research team. So let me just go ahead and wrap up with some reflections from Erica Weinthal, who teaches in the School of Environment and has been a lead faculty on this project. So this is a quote from Erica. I'm sorry, it's not on the slide. Having environmental justice work housed in a humanities center has been critical for elevating the connections to human rights and systemic racism that undergird inequities in access to clean and a healthy environment. Studying environmental justice through a humanist lens offers scholars of the environment a more reflective and nuanced approach to understanding how justice is a constant feature in environmental struggles across the world. So I won't have time to go over my third slide, but I want to leave you with two quick thoughts. So first is an observation. So often in collaborations between the humanities and the professions, the humanists are slotted into the role of providing empathy. So this project is interesting to me in that our colleagues in environmental science and policy are looking to the humanities to bring critical systemic analysis to the table. And the second is a question, which is kind of on the slide. As universities, announce anti-racist initiatives while simultaneously ushering in deep cuts, will this model of collaboration that I've described here, centered both on social justice and the critical humanities, will that be able to thrive, or will it need to fight to survive? So thank you.
Hi, this is Sylvester speaking. My pronouns are he, him, his. I am excited to be here speaking with all of you. So this slide that I'm beginning with has the logo for Virginia Tech at the top in burgundy and orange, and it has Liberal Arts and Human Sciences, which is the name of the college in which the Humanities Center is established, followed by Center for Humanities. And Virginia Tech is beneath that. The V and the T as part of the Virginia Tech logo is to the left. And there are three images here, one of a group of people at a meeting. The middle image is that of digital circuits superimposed over an urban skyline. And the last image is of an office desk with a laptop and smartphone. So our mission for the Virginia Tech Center for Humanities is to promote traditional humanistic research and to engage creatively with major technological issues that are transforming the modern world, to strengthen human-centered scholarship and to make technology accountable to humanistic concerns. So this mission reflects the establishment of Virginia Tech's Center for Humanities as an entity that is tasked with supporting humanistic scholarship that is at a comprehensive university, but one that is best known for its leadership in technology, and that is attuned to the fact that technology has become a very broad issue that's impacting virtually every dimension of our lives, and that in and of itself actually constitutes an important motive for involving humanists to participate in the leadership of managing and directing technology. We can move to the next slide. This slide has an image to the right that is a cover of the magazine from our college of Liberal Arts and Human Sciences. That magazine is called Illumination, and it features an image of a humanoid AI robot named Sophia that has a very humanoid engineered head attached to a very machine presenting torso. And the caption on the cover of that magazine is, "Do you trust this robot?" As technologies increasingly govern our lives, Virginia Tech asks, who's governing technology? And to the left are a few bullet points that I'll talk about. So one of the efforts that our Humanities Center is supporting in a very integral way is a university-wide effort that is called Tech for Humanity. This is meant to be doubly meaningful to indicate that Virginia Tech, which is often known as Tech for short, is serving the interests of humanity, and that technology should be accountable to human interest. So there are very important elements of this initiative that our Humanities Center is very strongly engaged in. One is really multiple ways of ensuring that technology is human-centered. We are supporting a lab that is focused on digital technology and human rights. So that's the second bullet point here. The name of that lab is named for the university-wide initiative. It's called the Tech for Humanity Lab. The other bullet point is curricular innovation. So our Humanities Center has been awarded a grant from the Andrew Mellon Foundation to create a university-wide minor that allows students from any major to concentrate in courses that focus on human-centered approaches to technology. Last thing that's listed here is collaborative research. Our center supports research that's happening across the university, particularly with our humanists. And this is a way of fulfilling our mission to help them to pursue the various work that they're doing that is just depending on what their own research interests are. We can move to the next slide. The last thing I'll mention is a project that we just concluded called Sustainable ESL. So this slide has to the right a black and white photo of tobacco plants on a tobacco farm, and a few bullet points on the left that I'll describe briefly. So the Sustainable English as Second Language Project, or Sustainable ESL, is an effort that we've just concluded that ran from the summer until October. It involved the generous support from the Henry Luce Foundation. It was part of a larger project that we've received funding for. The aim was to help mitigate the negative impact of COVID-19. We did so by supporting farm laborers in the Virginia region. And we did so by providing conversational English classes. So we had a number of different participants who agreed to work with farm laborers to hold English language conversations with them. This enhanced the ability of farm laborers to be able to articulate their own needs, to be able to support their rights, to be able to engage in conversation with those with whom they were working and for whom they were working, to be able to support a variety of needs. And we recognize that the Sustainable ESL effort is resonant with the larger interest in supporting the labor rights of highly vulnerable populations. So those are a couple of ways that our Center for Humanities is engaged with social justice work.
Hi, everyone. This is Lee speaking, Lee Swigert. Go by she, her, hers pronouns. I direct a set of programs in my center, which is called the International Center for Ethics, Justice, and Public Life at Brandeis University, and I direct the programs in International Justice and Society. This is a center that has some longevity. It was created in 1998 with an endowment by a gentleman named Abraham Feinberg. This endowment covers our core expenses, but we generally have to have external grant funding or donor funding for the programs we run. So the logo for the center shows the name International Center for Ethics, Justice, and Public Life with a compass. And the compass is sort of symbolic of our center having a guiding or a directing role on our campus. So our mission has a couple of parts: to develop effective responses to conflict and injustice by offering innovative approaches to conflict transformation, to strengthen the work of international justice and human rights institutions through programs and inquiry exploring their sociocultural complexities and assumptions, to engage undergraduates across the US in experiential learning and work with state-level legislative processes. And we encourage a certain measure of ethical practice and ethical inquiry in everything we do. So let me just say a couple of major programs that are going on now. And our center has been on for so long that we've had programs core programs that have come and gone, either because they reached their natural conclusion or because, frankly, we ran out of funding. So right now, I have a colleague who runs a program that is doing an international, worldwide network of practitioners and peace builders who use the arts and culture in working toward conflict transformation. It's a very unique network. I myself worked for many years running a program called the Brandeis Institute for International Judges, which brought together judges sitting on supranational courts and tribunals with supranational jurisdictions in a very unique kind of intimate conversational setting. And we developed reports from that. And then another colleague of mine has a program called ENACT, which is the educational network for active civic transformation. And it now has programs in all 50 states where universities that are close to state capitals bring students for experience in state level legislation, lawmaking, and advocacy. But there have been so many programs that we've done that are no, in fact, the Brandeis Institute for International Judges is now complete. We used to run programs called seminars in the professions and humanities for people in different kinds of fields to bring them to talk about literature and poetry and the impact on their work. And I can't even say how many different programs that have now come and gone. Next slide, please. Having said that, my own work in international justice and society has sort of evolved and morphed over the years. And coming out of this long work I did over 15, 16 years with the Brandeis Institute for International Judges, I realized how much the diversity of the judicial institutions I was working with and with the staff and the judges who work there, how much they were impacted by different languages and different cultures and different legal traditions that come together. So last year, well, early 2020, I created a new initiative, which is called the Language, Culture, and Justice Hub. And it's an online platform that acts as a clearinghouse for scholarship and practitioners-based commentary about how language and culture impact justice. So it really brings together people working at the nexus of these three phenomena, and they come from very diverse fields. They can be researchers, practitioners, interpreters, lawyers, people who are social workers, people who are really dealing with what happens when these three things come together, justice being very broadly defined. And our first big public-facing program is next week, and it is a virtual learning exchange that will run for 48 hours that is looking at language for and about migrants in 3 continents, Australia, Europe, and North America. And it's an asynchronous written exchange that people can move in and out of. We have over 200 registered participants, and we have people from maybe 25, 30 countries. So this is going to be a big experiment to see how we can really bring together a network of people working on language and migration, online in this challenging time. Next slide, please. So I wanted to bring up some key issues, and maybe I'm going to be a little bit more frank than some of the other panelists have been, because I've been at the center for a long time and I've seen a lot of challenges that it has come up against. Let me just start by saying our center has an amazing job of bridging the scholar-practitioner divide, and students have really, really benefited from, for example, having an international judge or prosecutor come in, or people who work for the UN and human rights, or people who are active peace builders from different parts of the world. So it's really of benefit, and students really get a lot out of meeting these people who are these high profile practitioners. But I have to say that our center has gotten caught in the politics of the university. Brandeis is the only secular, but a secular university associated with the US Jewish population, and then also diaspora populations. And we work me in particular in international justice and human rights, and the issue of Israel and Palestine occupied territories has frequently come up. We have had people very intimately connected with our work who have been critical of Israel, critical of the wall being built, a whole number of issues. And most of our donor base for the university is Jewish. And there have been some backlashes. A previous president even removed somebody on our international advisory board, the president of Al-Quds University, because there had been some demonstrations there that looked anti-Semitic. So we have kind of gotten caught in the crosshairs of this sort of political sort of dilemma that's much bigger than our center. I also have to say that with our endowment, we feel a little vulnerable right now because we do have this kind of poor funding. I think all universities are really feeling the financial impact of the COVID pandemic. And, it makes me wonder sort of where we're all going to be when this sort of shakes down. So that's, I think, one of the issues of having this sort of core funding that always looks like we're really rich while, the departments are not, or something like that. And then finally, just having been with the center a long time, I've seen that as the priorities of the university change, we sort of, we have our core mission, but we're constantly trying to shape ourselves and bend ourselves in order to support what the university is trying to achieve. And that can be a real challenge. And it can be a challenge in terms of our manpower, woman power, and also in terms of the financial resources we have. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. We're also delighted to see that there are some 20 participants watching this event. We were worried no one would turn up, but we're really happy that there are 20 some people, and we would love to hear your comments and questions and concerns and what things you're thinking about. A reminder to use the Q&A function in Zoom, not the chat function. Use the Q&A function to leave your comments and questions, and we'll go through those. I see that we have a couple of things waiting. Okay, so if you leave your name, I'm gonna read your name if that's okay with you. Tiffany Snowden says, I work at a health science center and most of our programs are at the graduate level. While the focus is on STEM by nature, lost the question, let's see. There it goes. Okay, while the focus is on STEM by nature, I'm curious if you all have any strategies or thoughts on how to navigate social justice without a centralized unit on campus. As of now, various units, including mine, diversity office, are doing things, but it's disconnected and doesn't present well in terms of external optics. I see Sylvester's already given an answer to that. Sylvester, do you want to start?
Sure, thanks for your comments and questions. So I was suggesting that one of the things that might be tried, at the risk of me suggesting things you've already done, is to have an existing office or entities, could be department, office, center, institute, to just take responsibility of leading what would be an initiative. I think it's helpful to name the initiative, to invite units across the university to participate. You could designate people across the campus to be affiliated with it. Be a simple web page. It doesn't cost anything. It doesn't mean that people now have to devote hours of their lives to this, but it becomes a way of just showing that there's some connection, since there's no formal entity that is handling this effort. And what I've suggested here is that co-sponsorship could be used in order to get funding from across units for specific programming. Doing something like this would increase the burden on that particular office. So it would be important to think about how to mitigate the increased administrative service demands. And one way of doing that is to hire some part-time help, even if it's just a few hours a week, to help with programming that's specific to this initiative. And again, if there is some co-sponsorship across the university, that could be a way of pooling resources in order to fund a few hours a week for someone to devote attention to this so that the existing staff in that office aren't overwhelmed with having to take the lead on this effort. That requires fewer resources than creating another entity, such as a new center or a new institute, to lead this work. And then it becomes a way of facilitating the coordination across the university. It's not an ideal thing to do, but particularly given the economic challenge, financial challenges that the pandemic is creating, is probably not the most feasible time to create a new center. And so this could be a way of having a coordinated effort to address it. That could be a starting place.
I think that's really interesting, Sylvester. Thank you for answering Tiffany's question. I'm curious, Christine, Chris, and Lee, do you have any suggestions for Tiffany? Again, the question is if we have strategies or thoughts on how to navigate social justice when there's not a centralized diversity office or centralized a unit on campus that coordinates the efforts. Other ideas?
Yeah, I mean, I can just chime in really briefly and endorse what Sylvester's saying. One other benefit of that approach is that it's if you're collaborating across, the university with different partners, it also becomes a little bit more nimble. You're not sort of housed within one office that may have one way of doing things. You may also be able to pivot and find new ways of engaging with your campus community that might be beyond just what your one unit may be able to accomplish.
And yeah, and just adding to that too, just thinking of it as building a kind of network and getting buy-in from whatever are like the kind of major units on your campus, like whether they're schools or departments or however things are configured. But like on the point of network, because I think it's sort of important to also think about like who's the audience for these kinds of projects. And if it's faculty, you're building a kind of constituency of faculty who are then invested in the work that you're doing. And they become a kind of base that might be able to also help to argue for better infrastructure down the line.
I want to move to a question and a comment from Deborah Lustig, who writes, "It's great to hear about what you all are doing at your centers and institutes. I work at a similar institute at UC Berkeley, the Institute for the Study of Societal Issues, ISSI. And I'm just going to read you the website so you can jot down the website if you're listening from home, issi.berkeley.edu. Deborah says, despite 40 plus years of providing a home and sense of belonging to BIPOC students and faculty, as well as some white scholars, and conducting innovative community engaged research that matters to marginalized communities, the university has decided to close ISSI in June 2021. I'm really sorry to hear that. They're citing budget constraints, and in particular saying that all institutes should be self-sustaining financially. So Deborah has a request. Please support our campaign to save ISSI, and they have a website, which I'll read out to you, socialjusticefutures.org. That's socialjusticefutures.org, or find us on Twitter at UC Berkeley ISSI. So we're happy to support you in those ways. We'll follow you on Twitter and we'll check out your website and try and disseminate that information to our networks. She also has a question. Are you all facing similar demands to be financially self-sustaining? How are your centers, institutes funded?
Can I intervene here? There is a big move by my university to actually, they have a new framework where centers and institutes are being charged now a particular amount of money for basic things like library services, like fundraising and development, and we're paying for the space we occupy. It's like everything is being monetized, and with there being some sort of credits for teaching courses to undergraduates. And the thing is, our center was not, people do teach courses from time to time, but we're not centrally a degree granting body, and so we're being in a way punished for not having that core function. So I really hear that this is hard. it's a really big challenge to meet.
I'll just jump in and say that we're a state of Florida institution, so you can imagine that means that we don't have very much money appropriated from the state. Our annual operating budget it's nice that we have one, but it doesn't really cover the way that we're running the program now with the number and quality of events that we're doing and the types of things that we want to do. And so, I spend a lot of my time as director looking for donors and frankly courting donors, people who are interested in the type of social justice work that our center does, our public facing work, and also writing grant applications, which I'm sure all of you do all the time as well. And we hope that we are able to keep overhead monies from successfully funded grant opportunities. The problem with grants, unless they provide for general funding, is that you have to do something. Right? Like a grant initiative is for a program building effort or for a research project or for something that requires additional effort, which needs more resources, which you may not have even if you get the grant. So, it's sort of a catch-22 with the grants, and also extremely time consuming. But we also have budget concerns, but mostly seek funding through grants and donors.
Yeah, at Virginia Tech, we fortunately are not at the point of having to deal with the type of budget model that you've described, which sounds like a full-on version of resource-centered management, RCM. So we are not required to generate our own revenue. We are within a college, and that college provides the operating funds, the base operating funds, with the expectation that we should be receiving external funding. So it's not a strict requirement. It's not like they're going to shut down our center if we don't bring in external funds, but it is expected that we seek funding. So far, we are a new center. We are only 2 years and a few months old. But so far, we've had some early success with external funding. And as Philip was pointing out, that's for specific projects. It's not money to be used in general for whatever we might need to pay for. It's for specific programming. And these are projects that we want to do, but it just underscores the point that was being articulated earlier. And that is, when it comes to base operating, if you don't have internal funding that is supporting that, it becomes very difficult to get external funding. And so then that means building an endowment. We have ambition of building a large endowment, but that typically takes either an incredibly well-resourced and generous individual donor, or it takes years and years and years of getting funding from several donors. And that doesn't mean one shouldn't do it. We are pursuing that, but it's just another indication that everything we do requires resources. Money has to come from somewhere, and it has not gotten easier to address those concerns. It's only becoming more challenging.
To add to that, so when we're going through much this, I mean, maybe not quite the same sort of scale of challenges that Lee was describing, but certainly there have been reviews of interdisciplinary units, across the university, right? And there's kind of tensions that are being cast in terms of sort of schools versus institutes or centers. So, I'll probably not comment on that here, but one thing I do want to say is, the humanities do a lot with not a lot of money. I remember sort of, early in my career, being deputized to go to a cross-institute meetings and like hearing the scale of the budgets of the other centers, and thinking that we could fairly comfortably fit in like a centrifuge or something, of the Genome Center. So, I mean, at some moments that argument has, I think, worked well. I mean, I don't, it just depends on your institution and depends on the commitment, with which people want to make cuts. But but I did, I do want to say again, and, again and again that, we do a lot with quite, with just a limited amount of resources.
I want to quickly add one thing, that when we turned our attention to social justice work and started producing these events that get, I'm going to say, lots of viewers, the university did take note. And I will say that I, in spite of our state appropriated funds, I do feel a lot of support from the deans that oversee the center where our center is housed. And when I did ask for some money to do some of the things that we do, like produce in-house videos and to hire musicians and stuff like that, they did come through with money. So I think that when, not tons, but I got a few $1,000s to sustain the type of work that we're doing. And I think to connect that to the conversation that we're having at the start around social justice issues, when universities say, we value these things, we want to do these things, we want to speak to these issues, and you say, okay, here it is, I'm doing it. At a certain point, somebody has to pony up with a little bit of cash, and that has worked in my case. I want to add that Deborah Losig says, regarding Tiffany's question, I think there are downsides to having a centralized equity and inclusion unit. We have that at UCB, but it seems like it lets the other units divisions off the hook. So just to add to the conversation, that there's some upsides and downsides to having a centralized diversity and inclusion office, which we're starting right now at FIU. The next question comes from Ana Abella, sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. I think someone mentioned an organization entity that centers can belong to or be affiliated with. Can you say a bit more about which or your centers or institutes are part of something like that, and what concrete benefits you've seen from that? Colleagues, are any of you and your centers affiliated with national organizations, such as the National Humanities Alliance?
Yes, we're affiliated with the consortium of humanities centers and institutes. Their website is chcinetwork.org. But if you just Google CHCI and humanities, it'll pop up. Also has been mentioned as the National Humanities Alliance. I will say that because we are a new center that's very small, and we have a very small budget, we have, for the time being, chosen to affiliate with the CHCI network because they have a sliding scale for membership. So the fee that you pay to participate is based on your budget. That's not true for the National Humanities Alliance. So we aspire to affiliate with the National Humanities Alliance formally. And when we get our budget in the right place, we will. We participated in their conferences. What are the concrete benefits? Having a network of colleagues who can give advice about how to run a center. The CHCI has conversations at each meeting for people who are new directors, for example, or new assistant or associate directors who have just created centers, as well as those who've been in this for a long time. And so you're able to easily get access to advice, to support. You as well immediately have a global network. So the CHCI is a global organization. And you're able to participate in the conferences until this year. Those have been on and off in the US and then abroad somewhere else. And so that's also an opportunity to be able to just learn more about how to run an organization, how to address some of these concerns about what are good ways to get funding, how do you administer programming in the most optimal way, et cetera.
Can I just add something? This isn't about an external kind of connection, but at Brandeis, there's a lot of centers and institutes, and there's certain connections among them where they really help each other with advice and how to negotiate particular kinds of situations. So that's also, if on your campus, there's a certain, sizable number of centers and institutes that can be a very helpful connection.
That is also the case at UMBC, where, you all may have, gleaned from my presentation, where, the centers really work closely together, and we instituted, 2 or 3 times a semester informal get-togethers with the other center directors in the arts, humanities, and social sciences. And that's been really helpful just in terms of comparing notes about things like recent executive orders from the administration and so forth. I also wanted to say, I think there are more robust organizations that I've seen supporting humanities centers than with regard to social science centers. And I don't know if Lee has found something, that you have been aligned with, but there's the Consortium of Social Science Associations, COSA, but it is not so, it is more of an advocacy unit for the social sciences on Capitol Hill. And it's not so much a convening of social science or a convening of research centers for the social sciences, like some of the humanities organizations that support centers aim to do. So if if anyone, I've poked around a bit, if anyone knows of such organizations that I've missed, please let me know. But I think that is an area for future growth potentially.
And one quick note about CHCI, which Sylvester mentioned, is that through CHCI, there are also grant opportunities. So for example, I think it's still active. They have a Mellon grant that supports multi-institutional collaborations and meant to also, there are also multinational collaborations. But again, it's work that is fairly, it's pretty labor intensive type of work, but it can be really rewarding depending on the topic that you want to work on with other institutions.
We are almost out of time. We have to end right at 3:30 because there's another event. I just want to say thank you to the AAA for allowing us to host this conversation. And thank you to the co-panelists. I want to point out that what's on the screen now are our email addresses, our personal Twitter handles, and the Twitter handles for our centers. All of us are very enthusiastic about this work, as I know you are, and we're happy to continue the conversation on Twitter or over email. So feel free to follow us. We'll follow you back. And thank you so much for joining us. Final words from the panelists.
Thank you all so much for joining us.
Yeah, we want to thank Philip and Christine for all your work.
Yes, this was really fun and very interesting.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We hope to talk to you on Twitter.
Bye.